Hello, this is part 2 of my 3-part series looking into what foster parenting is really like just from a day-to-day basis. So if you missed my first video, I would go back and watch it. That overviews the first 30 days of sort of what you can expect and what a lot of foster parents go through. This video is going to be more of what happens next. So the parts of just like the case plan working, where there's not a lot going on, we are waiting, and things are going on with the parents, but for the kids, we sort of get into more of a routine and a rhythm. So before I begin, it's really important that I say my disclaimer. Of course, I am just foster parent. I'm not a professional. I'm not a social worker, therapist, attorney, doctor, none of that. And so I will give my thoughts and advice and opinions, but it is just that. It is not professional advice, and I leave it there. You take it for what it is. Some of it will apply to you, some of it will work for you, and some of it won't. So the middle part of foster care can last anytime. So I've had placements last just a couple weeks, couple months, and even more than a year. So this kind of middle time can really be long. And I only say that because I think it's important that we kind of set our expectations, that we're making a commitment. And if we're not comfortable with a long-term commitment, like over a year perhaps, then we should really reevaluate the types of cases and type of foster parenting we are doing. For example, if you are not wanting kids to maybe stay 6 months, a year, or longer, perhaps respite care or emergency care is better for you. So after all the initial appointments, you are going to start to establish services for what the child needs. Often this includes mental health services. So if it hasn't happened yet, an assessment likely is coming where someone is assessing just the mental state of the child. You know, trauma, abuse, neglect can really impact the mental state, but also the removal from the parents. And so we as foster parents and child welfare professionals sort of huddle around the kid and provide mental health services. At least that's the way it should be happening. If you're not seeing these mental health assessments hitting your calendar or being talked about, you can ask about it. So mental health services can look like a variety of things, and typically it's added on. So usually just starts with an assessment, maybe then turns into once a week counseling. From there, if that therapist feels that the child needs more support, they may bring in a full professional team. So someone who is counseling with the child once a week, maybe meeting with you by phone once a week, perhaps seeing a psychiatrist and getting evaluations completed. So it really depends on the child's needs, and it does change. You know, the first 6 months of knowing a child, it may be not needed, but after that, you may see that behaviors and emotional needs have changed and more support is needed. So this is ongoing. It's all paid for through the Department of Mental Health, but with that means you're dealing with the Department of Mental Health. So there is a lot of paperwork and a lot of steps and sadly a lot of turnover. And so that can really impact the work we're doing. And so that's why it's so important that we stay on top of these details and advocate, because these things can take a long time or get missed or put on the back burner. I've had kids be on waiting lists for 6 months. In addition to what the professional team is going to provide, you as a foster parent also are going to be supporting their mental health in the home. So as a reminder, kids, even months into the foster care process, are still grieving. They're still experiencing loss. There's turmoil in their life still. So even if it feels like you've settled into a routine, healing and overcoming trauma can be lifelong. So as foster parents, it's really important that we dig into our trauma-informed care and understand the mental health needs of kids who've experienced trauma and neglect. So in addition to mental health services being put into place, you're also going to probably examine the developmental status of the child. So I always recommend for young childs aged 0 to 5 to fill out an ASQ questionnaire. You can do a Google search, and I've linked them on my Patreon. And this gives you a very broad overview of where they're at developmentally. So speech, communication, their fine and gross motor skills, their problem solving, all of that. And if you're seeing that the child is scoring very low on certain areas, you can use that as an advocate tool to advocate for developmental services. And what I mean by that is it is speech therapy, occupational therapy, sometimes just child development, which is learning to play, learning to do typical developing things for that age group. Again, this is for little ones. So there are, we call them regional center services in my state, but it's different depending on where you are. But it's essentially a hub where little ones 0 to 3 can get developmental support, and then people over the age of 3 with a disability can get lifelong support. These types of services do take some time, and again, you're dealing with the government, so it can take follow-up and follow-through and strong advocacy from foster parents. So if a child has a speech delay and is, maybe 3 years old or 2 years old and not speaking, I would alert that and continue to alert and to continue to advocate. I would mention, though, that foster parents typically do not have developmental rights of children. So anytime that service is implemented, the biological parent has to approve. Many kids in care also need educational support. And as you can imagine, being removed or changing schools, they get set further and further back. And then when you compound trauma, neglect, it can also come out in school in a negative way, and they can fall behind in school. And so education is typically a hot topic within, your advocacy and professional team. So any child age 3 and up can get an IEP assessment. And you're probably thinking, 3-year-old preschool, yes, they can still get an IEP assessment and still receive services through the school district if they qualify. They need a qualifying diagnosis. So that could be autism or other types of developmental disability, and so on. You can find a list online if you search for the qualifying diagnoses for an IEP. Additionally, kids school age, so kindergarten up, can get an IEP assessment. Now, foster parents typically do not hold educational rights for the child. The parents may hold this, or a CASA may hold this. So it's important to ask what your role is in the education advocacy world. So we may not be able to initiate an IEP, but we can certainly ask about it and bring it up. And while we may not be able to go to a school conference, we are still in the weeds with our kids after school doing homework, seeking out tutors, and trying to support them educationally. So depending on how the case is being managed, the social worker and the parents' involvement, the educational plan can be a little bit tricky, but if you keep at it, you can all align and find a path forward for this child. So this probably sounds like a lot, and it is, but it all kind of gets spread out more. Whereas the first month, they're putting a ton within that first month to get those initial appointments done. From there, it's kind of spread out a bit. So I typically have, when I'm thinking about my time commitments and all that, I probably have a phone call a week where I have to jump on for more than 30 minutes and have to discuss with a professional, someone on the team or someone I'm lining up services for and whatnot. Newer kids, there's more, right? But as time progresses, it becomes more manageable. And also appointments. So there's a couple of things you can do to help we don't want to minimize appointments, but manage it. So for little ones who are in daycare and preschool, oftentimes the speech therapist or occupational therapist can go to the daycare. And always ask this too before you start with that provider. Ask, can they go to the school and the preschool to support the child, so that it's not an additional meeting you have to go to. I always recommend attending, though, once a month if you can, if they can come to the house or you go to a gym, just so you can be involved in how the child is doing and know where they're at, and also do some of the work at home to support what they're learning in their services. For little ones, you are typically involved in the therapy session. So it's usually play therapy. And so if you are planning to foster a little one, make sure you have that in your mindset that once a week or every other week, you may be going to a therapy session. So think about what that means for your work. Now, for older kids, they usually do one-on-one talks with the therapist where you're not involved, but you still have to transport them and you still have to wait in the waiting room and be there. Sometimes, though, people can take their work with them and work on their laptop. In some cases as well, you can get transportation support. I would say little ones typically have more appointments in terms of services because you have all those developmental milestones to hit, whereas older kids, services happen more at school. So through an IEP, you might have speech and OT, but that's all happening within the school day and does not require you as the caregiver to pick them up, take them somewhere different, and be there to help facilitate a service. So when you start to do some calculations for hopeful foster parents, and you can kind of think about, well, how much time am I going to be able to commit to all of these appointments, and what will my work allow? These are questions to ask, of course, ahead of time. I find that if I can pick one day a week where my schedule is more flexible and I can maybe do a half day and pick up extra hours at other days, that can be helpful. I sometimes pick up work on the weekends, so every job is different, but typically the younger kids will have more of those appointments and needs and all of that. Older kids, of course, still need a ton of support. It's just going to look different. So where an older child may need IEP support, well, then there's academically a lot of support needed with the home. So you're going to be doing homework together. You're going to be helping with projects, keeping track of their deadlines in support and helping them, and making sure they're understanding their homework and turning it in, and their behaviors at school are being addressed properly and in a trauma-informed way. So there's definitely work to be done and support that foster parents give to older kids, but it looks a little bit different and often can happen at school. If we're talking about time commitments, if you're with an agency, often for new kids entering the system and new to your home, your agency will be at your house weekly. Generally, agency workers work kind of the 9 to 6 hours as well. So you would need to be coming home early to facilitate that visit. Ask your agency what they typically do. Some are bi-weekly and some are once a month. You also have social worker visit or case manager monthly visits. Eventually, you will have an advocacy team. So a CASA, a gal, an attorney who will send a representative or appear in person, maybe not monthly, but every couple months. All of these people work normal hours, 9 to 6. So I think for me, this was one of the hardest things to wrap my head around, because you're expecting me to do all these things within the workday, and I'm also maintaining a job. So I have had to find ways to work around, set my meetings in certain ways, talk to my employer. It is not impossible, but it is definitely something to consider and think about and have these conversations ahead of time so you know what your flexibility is. And then beyond there, you can lean on the support of the department. So with transportation services, that's going to be a big help. And seeing if things can happen within the school day or at school. Some social workers will visit the child at daycare, and that can be their monthly visit. It really just depends on how the case is being managed. I always tell foster families to advocate for your own boundaries. So if there is a scheduling boundary, yes, of course, we always have grace, and people need to change and reschedule and cancel, of course, because we will need that too. But it is okay to have certain boundaries in place and establish that at the beginning. It doesn't have to be mean or anything like that. It can just be, I work full time. So anytime a meeting comes up, I have to ensure that it aligns with my work schedule. They're flexible, but they do need notice. Things like that can be very helpful to establish the beginning and kind of sets the tone. Okay, so there is kind of more happening within the home I want to touch on. So if you have a partner, things can get different when you have a spouse or a partner and you start parenting in a trauma-informed way, or you are faced with trauma responses. So I always recommend aligning with your partner and finding ways to parent together on the same page with the same boundaries and the same consequences. This is going to make a huge difference. Also, if you are in a partnership, you can help each other. So oftentimes if I am, working with a child who's having a meltdown and I need a break, my husband can come in and support me. And he has a fresh perspective. He's been listening. He's maybe noticing some cues I've missed, and can come in and save the day. Sometimes if I hear my husband, the same thing, oh, you know what, I'm thinking through this child, my husband's doing great, but like could use a little help. So I may come in with some crushed ice. That's just a very simple example, but there's ways that you can support each other and talk about it. And, I also will give my husband a night off. He can go out with his friends. I'm going to take the lead, and we switch off, and so that we each get breaks, because that is very important. And I need to be clear and honest that foster care can be draining, and it can pull a lot, and you can become exhausted, and you likely will hit points where you feel this could be coming close to a breaking point. The statistics are all there with disruptions and foster parents quitting. And so having just realistic expectations, having boundaries, and like keeping tabs on where everyone is at is going to be really important. And fostering your support group, right? So your village, your friends and family that at the beginning said, you know what, I'm here to help. What can I do? Call them, give them things to do. It is okay to ask for help, and everyone does it. So even though foster parents, especially on the internet, because, creators play by a whole different set of rules, but it may seem like everyone is holding it together, but we're all asking for help, and we all need help in order to get through these longer months. We're just waiting for courts to decide what's going to happen. In addition to your partner, you may have kids at home. So things can become exhausting for them as well. They may have tolerated something at the beginning and no longer can tolerate, or their views have changed. They've also been growing up. They've been maturing. A year has maybe passed. So it's always important to check in with people who live at home and see how they're feeling. Spend one-on-one time with them. Address their concerns and take action when needed. Kids who are in your home permanently may not have experienced or understand what is going on with the foster child. And so these difficult conversations will come up, sometimes unexpected at the dinner table. And so it's important to maybe think ahead about how you can nurture that moment, redirect as needed, or validate and hear them, but keep it appropriate for all of the people there. Because, for example, you may not want an older child sharing an experience with an abuser outright to a young child, a toddler. It could get very confusing. I always believe in telling the truth, but always in an age-appropriate way. And so think of what's going to work for your family if these things come up, how you can interject in the moment. And again, not shame, not guilt, nurture and validate, and support everyone who's there. Your relationship with the foster child is also going to evolve. So you may see behaviors, or they may be acting one way for the first month or first few months, and then it sort of starts to change. This is normal and natural, and every child goes through it. Sometimes it's just a day they're acting one way and then they change, and it continues. There are seasons of every year. You're going to hit times in the year that have trauma reminders. So pay close attention to the calendar, when they were removed, when DCFS got involved, when certain things happen that you know of. You can kind of be aware and mark them on your calendar and know that week we're going to take it slow. Whether or not they can articulate and communicate, their body keeps the score. If you haven't read the book, The Body Keeps the Score, I highly recommend it. But kids are holding into a lot and can feel things even if they can't communicate. It may take a while for kids to open up, right? They've experienced grief and loss. And if you think about just generally anyone who's experienced something very tragic in their life, it can take a long time to recover. And often they are moody, or don't want to open up, or want to just spend all their time in their room. These are normal. And I think as foster parents, we're so quick. We want to jump in and help and nurture and heal and do all those lovely things. And we just want them to be happy. But the reality is that goal is usually not attainable, or it can take a very long time. And so I always cherish our moments of joy, but I know that there's still going to be tension and work and time. And I just have to remain patient and meet them where they're at. You're also probably going to run into harder to manage or fix or change things related to self-care. Usually that's where it is. So sleep, Sleep is always hard. There's going to be so many things to work through at nighttime: nightmares, night terrors, wetting the bed at night, getting up and wanting to eat at night. There's just so many things. Fears, just not sleeping, resisting bedtime. I could go on. So just know that those types of things are gonna come up. I always recommend like double wrapping the bed. So like so you have your fitted sheet and the fitted sheet, the waterproof mattress protector, a sheet, the fitted sheet, and waterproof mattress protector. I don't know if you get that, but I highly recommend it because if in the middle of the night there's an accident, you can just take the top layers off and there's a fresh bed underneath that first waterproof mattress protector. This is a tongue twister. Anyways, the bedroom is the sacred place. You can offer lighting options, have them decorate. You need them to feel comfortable and safe in their bedroom. You're also probably going to run into eating problems, and they may have a very restricted diet and be very choosy in what they eat. Maybe they overeat and gorge until they're sick. Maybe they're hoarding. There can be so many things to encounter, and again, these things take time. You're not going to see these things corrected in a week. A reward and sticker chart is not going to solve these problems. It can potentially in the short term, but just know that this is months long, and it happens with everyone. I always encourage people to join their local support group or their online Facebook group, and you will see that these things are coming up again. Also, as things become established and routines are established, you're going to also be having to kind of work through harder things like technology, cell phone use, tablet use, video game and screen time. Where are your boundaries? How are you keeping them safe in those moments? All things to discover. You're also going to be probably teaching or encountering self-care, grooming, hygiene type things. These, if you think about it, when someone is sad and depressed, they don't want to shower, they don't want to get up, they don't want to do their laundry, things like that. And so it is our job as foster parents to ensure that they maintain proper hygiene and they're brushing their teeth. And so these struggles can occur and it can be worked on. And, every child is going to be different and going to have the things that they struggle with. And us as foster parents are just always problem solving. So that's what I try to do on my channels, is try to pick apart these like smaller moments and help problem solve. I always love talking to a therapist though, or support group. That's where I get my best advice and I can be specific in what the case is and work through these things, because these are difficulties that will last months, but it is absolutely possible to work through. And I have seen it happen, and it just takes time, care, commitment, compassion, and you'll get there. Usually in these months in the middle, you have a standard visitation schedule that has been set up by court. It is court ordered, and it usually is 1 to 3 times a week for a couple hours at a time, usually monitored or unmonitored. There's someone who's there supervising and making sure, everyone is staying safe. And so these visits can become exhausting, and you might see resistance or anger, fear, frustration from the kids before, during, after. And it's important that we always kind of reflect on what is causing all of this, asking why, leading with curiosity, and just meeting them where they're at. Some kids do not feel comfortable verbalizing what's going on with them. They may not know. You may see a child clinging to you as you're transferring them to a visit, but perhaps it's because they miss their parents so much and they don't want to be put through the pain of that separation again that comes at the end of the visit. It's hard to know. And over time, we observe, we document, and we report back and work with a therapist. If there's major problems, I always recommend escalating that up and getting someone involved to support you and the child and facilitating the visits. Visits are very important though. I talk about it a lot on my channels because they're so important. And that's because the 2 things: to maintain a bond and to keep that going between child and their parent, because again, we're all working towards reunification. So keeping that consistency the best we can. And also, because it's court ordered, the parents are being graded on it. How many are they attending? Are they late? How are they working with the child? Do they engage properly? Are they caring for their needs at the visit? These are moments that the parents are proving to the court that they are fit to parent. And so the only time that they can prove this is at a visit. Yes, they still need to do their therapy or AA or rehab or whatever they're doing. But the visits are really crucial, and you will hear about them in court, and the judge makes determinations based on how visitations are going. Your relationship with the biological parent will also likely evolve and change. You may hit bumps where you feel like you're on a good path and you're connecting, and everyone is professional and working on the same thing. And then something happens and suddenly it's not a nice relationship anymore. This is common, and I don't have a quick fix. If someone tells you they have a quick fix, they're wrong. I think the only thing that you can return back to is being compassionate and educating yourself on what they're going through. What is addiction like? What are the cycles of addiction? What are the things that they're struggling with, and what can you expect? This is just an example. And so as these things happen and we go up and down and our relationships change, I always just refocus and recenter on the child. What does the child need in these moments? How can I best support the child? If I need a social worker or case manager to get involved in our communication and maybe manages things between us, that's okay too. If it's supporting the child and supporting, the team and everyone is working properly, that's what I advocate for. And it can change over time. For court, you typically have hearings, every 3 months, 6 months. If there's changes occurring, the judge might set another hearing in 30 days, for example. And so I always recommend going to court, and you may not be allowed into the courtroom, but it will mark that you are there, like in the minute orders, it'll say that caregivers requested to attend, and the bio parents can object to you being there. That's their right. But I like to be there to show my support, and also it's an opportunity to talk to the advocate, so the CASA, the GAL, the attorney, and just even get 5 minutes or even 3 minutes to share any concerns or any updates. This is the chance. And also support the child. Over the age of 4 or 6, kind of depending on where you're at, they're going to be asked to go to the courthouse. And every courthouse is managed differently. Sometimes the kids are in a separate area. Sometimes they go into court. Sometimes they don't. But I like to be there for the kids, show them my support, and it also keeps me in the loop of what's going on, because sometimes you won't know. Some case managers will not share any details, and the only time you're going to get details is if you go to court. This is important also for your heart. If they start talking about progressing and moving forward closer to reunification, you can start to prepare your heart and mindset for that loss and refocus into advocacy and transition plans and what that child needs and family needs to be successful. All right, I want to talk about a few curveballs that you may experience in this section of foster care. So, as with any section, you can have a family member step forward and be discovered or somehow come into the case and say, I can take in the children. And usually family members are preferred. There is research to support that kinship placements have better outcomes, and this is what a lot of the policies are based on. And so you may have a family member come forward and say, you know what, I'm ready to step in, and this is taking a while, and I'd rather them be with family. Sometimes if there's siblings in another home, a case manager, social worker, or judge, or whoever may determine that the child in your care should go move with siblings. And so that, again, is usually prioritized, and that can happen, and it can happen quickly. Anytime the child is removed from your care and placed elsewhere, it can happen quickly. I had one situation where I thought we were going to be going on for another 3 to 6 months, and at that court hearing, reunification was ordered. And I had no idea that was even on the table for that court hearing, and it still happened. And it happened within 24 hours. The team wanted it to happen that day, but I was like, I I need to do laundry, I need to get their stuff together, and I'd love to have a therapy session, emergency session, and just give them the news so everything can be a little bit more trauma informed. And so things can happen quickly. They can reunify quickly. They can, move to another home quickly. So just, we can't live in these hypothetical situations, but it's important to know that this can happen, and this is foster care. The social worker may also just decide to remove the kids from your care. There can be allegations that come up. So the child or the parent perhaps is saying something like that you are not caring for the child properly, you're neglecting or harming them. And false allegations do occur. And I always recommend keeping clear documentation and sharing that documentation frequently with the caseworker, attorney, the team involved, so that everyone has a clear sense of what's going on in the home. But these things happen and children are removed, and they're typically removed without notice and very quickly. And I don't say that so you live in fear of these accusations, but it's also important, this is why I always talk about having a relationship with the bio family, keeping them involved and in the loop where it makes sense and where they're allowed to be, updating them on the kids, and working on a professional relationship with them. It may not be easy, but it's very important, and it can help reduce these miscommunications or these false allegations. But yes, things can happen quickly, and we do our best to prevent that from happening. And the best way a foster parent can do that is by open communication, alerting the team of things happening, and documenting and writing. Another curveball that may happen is the judge may decide that reunification is the services are no longer being offered, and it's no longer the plan. And so that really changes kind of what's going on. As foster parents, our mindset is returning home. How can we keep them safe and get them there quickly and support the family to reunify? But that's not always the case. And when the court kind of turns to a different way, it does change our thought process as foster parents. We are often asked if we will provide permanency, and I have so many mixed feelings on that, probably for another video, but I do like to call it out, because you should know what your answer may be should you be asked to adopt or provide permanency through guardianship. You do not have to. It is a big decision, but it's good to kind of know where you're at with it in case you are asked. And of course, with that, things can happen with the parents. Maybe there was an accident or a new criminal charge or an overdose and things like that. And so those curveballs can definitely come in. Another curveball could be that the mother gets pregnant, and adding a baby to the mix does complicate things. And again, that's for another video. I could talk about all these complications that come up, but it can happen. Sometimes it does. I definitely know several families, it's happened to me, these things come up. I want to kind of wrap it all up with some just general thoughts. So this part in the middle can be exhausting and can drone on, and it can feel like it's taking forever for courts to make a decision. But just know that it can be anywhere from 6 months to 2 years for the courts to decide to reunify or to switch paths to permanency elsewhere. And it can feel like a very long time, but it also can feel like a very short amount of time. It's important to remember that change of circumstances or overcoming addiction does take a long time. Establishing work and housing and proving that consistency takes time. Courts usually want to see things, happen over time and show that it's consistent and it's not just a 1 month thing. So you can become tired. And I always go back to investing in that self-care. Going to support group, reaching out to your friends and family and asking for help, and also at times taking advantage of respite. There are a lot of positive things that respite can give us, and setting up a monthly weekend with another family may be really helpful as you kind of get through all of these phases as well. And try to stay diligent with your organization, your paperwork. It is easy to fall behind, but harder to get caught up. take photos. Don't forget about that life book. I find that if I put, usually the last day of the month or first day of the month, I really try to like organize, get caught up, do everything I need to do so that I stay on top of documentation and paperwork and all of the things that I need to do. Then I don't feel like I'm falling behind or overwhelmed by the like secretarial things of being a foster parent. During this time, you can have some of the best moments of being a foster parent though. You can see foster kids overcome a challenge or fear and achieve something. You're a parent, you're gonna be proud of them, you're gonna see growth, they're gonna reach new milestones, and you get to be a part of that. And bonding and connecting and loving on kids is always fulfilling, and that is why we become foster parents. And so if you're ever feeling a little lost, just return to your why. Why did you get into this? Why are you doing this? And remind yourself that this is the work. And yes, it's heavy and hard. We signed up for it, which doesn't take away from how hard it is, but it does get better. Seasons change, kids move in and out, and things will resolve eventually. And so I thank you for getting through the harder, longer months and sometimes years of foster care, because it can be hard, but your consistency is so critical. You are the one that knows everything that's been going on for this amount of time, and you have been tracking it and paying attention, and that consistency is so critical to the child's well-being and them getting services and getting the help they need. And so thank you for sticking with it. My final video in this is going to be reunification. So what that phase looks like and what you can expect. So there will be one more. So I hope you'll stick around for that one.